In Gran Turismo 4, one of my favorite things to do is finding any economy box or one of the many JDM cars in the game, and then turning it into a racing machine to embarrass purpose-built racing cars for a fraction of the cost. A few months prior to the playthrough you're about to witness, I had done just that, by beating Gran Turismo 4 using only cars which are road legal, according to the game at least. This was one of my favorite playthroughs I had ever done in this game, and you guys seem to like it just as much. However, after mentioning that I may try to finish what Dustin Eden started and beat the game using only used cars, maybe I'll prove Eden wrong and complete a world championship in a used car. And since some of you rightfully complain about my, controversial car choice to beat the world championship with, there was this itch that I just couldn't get rid of thinking about this kind of playthrough. And so eventually I came up with this, the budget used car challenge. Just like my previous runs, the main goal is to reach and beat the Gran Turismo World Championship. But this time I am only allowed to buy and drive cars which come from any of the free used car dealerships, which can only cost a maximum of 25,000 credits. This will therefore severely limit my options when it comes to high performance cars like Aston Martins and Lotuses, but would also ban the usage of the 4 Jet Black Le Mans race cars which only appear in the used car dealership every once in 100 weeks. Additionally, any price cars are completely excluded from the challenge, including the ability to sell them. This adds an extra layer of difficulty to the playthrough, especially in the early stages, and was also done because I was still using the Gran Turismo 4 randomizer mod. In case you have not seen it yet, this mod completely randomizes all the prize car rewards, but also adds a few quality of life improvements, like having significantly improved car sounds for a wide variety of cars, some of which you'll definitely notice in this playthrough. And lastly, there are no limits to any upgrades I need to perform to these used cars, as I will need to extract the most out of them to be even able to compete, especially once we get to the World Championship. So with the stage set and a score to settle, let's see if Gran Turismo 4 is beatable using only used cars on a budget. Now, before we can do basically anything, we must get a car, obviously. And lucky for us, the 10,000 credits that the game starts you out with is already enough for some really good cars. Think about an A86, a Civic, or even a Subaru Impreza. So obviously we didn't go for any of that and instead chose a Suzuki Cappuccino. Yeah, a car that weighs less than most modern Formula 1 cars while having an engine that is smaller than most motorbike engines was going to be our starter car. Now, despite the car's lack of, well, pretty much anything, it's actually a pretty decent starter car. It can be used for a variety of main and local championships, and is one of the fastest K cars in the game, made even better by the fact that it only costs just over half of our initial budget, which means that we can give it some minor upgrades. It was then time for its first test in the K Car Cup, which it passed with flying colors. After this, I found a similar event, but this time it was limited to only K cars from Suzuki, which would give me a nice 5,000 credits per race. However, we already needed a license for this, so that's what we acquired first. And since we were not going to use any prize cars in this playthrough, I just needed to complete the license, which felt quite refreshing since I would always go for gold in my previous playthroughs. That didn't mean that we didn't get any gold licenses though. In fact, most of them were still gold, and sometimes I would even try to go for the gold anyway, even though I didn't really need it. 218,999. I don't need it, but it's still funny nevertheless. Yeah, I think I've seen these licenses a bit too often. It therefore only took us 20 minutes to get through the National B license, so we were able to enter the Suzuki K-Car Cup immediately afterwards, which unsurprisingly went just about as well as the normal K-Car Cup. Since we had now accumulated a good amount of money, we were able to afford an upgraded turbocharger, racing exhaust, flywheel and sports suspension, giving it a whopping 92 horsepower, a crazy power figure indeed. For its next test, we went to the Sunday Cup, where it already showed just how fast this car can be. On a high-speed ring, it was capable of reaching just under 200 km per hour. However, since the Sunday Cup is not very good when it comes to its rewards, we went to the FR Challenge immediately afterwards, where much more powerful cars awaited us, like Chryslers, Nissans and BMWs. Since my car would have zero chance of winning on some of the larger tracks, we went to Motorland first, a track which I can only describe as an even smaller version of Tsukuba. This is where our little cappuccino really shined, as we were simply able to outpace everyone in the corners while still having enough momentum to compensate for the lack of power. Despite the fact that this was a 200-point race, which is Gran Turismo 4's way of saying that the race you're about to do is borderline impossible, we were able to catch up to the Chrysler 300C in front and battle with it until the very end.
Oh, look at this, we're catching up in the corners very quickly.
Oh! Around the outside on the VNC. David taking down Goliath, come on! Come on, little Ferris, come on, little 600cc engine. Oh, we clutched that up. 0.6 of a second ahead of the Chrysler. Only with the Cappuccino. With that sensational move in the final sector of the race, our little Cappuccino had managed to successfully beat a car with 4 times more horsepower. With a massive confidence boost from that race, we also tried our luck at Tsukuba, but unfortunately this is where I realized that the car had reached its limits so far. We then decided to look at some of the other events we can do, but before that, we had found this car. Is there a midget? It's perfect! It's perfect! 10 kilometers, Tiran color, it's everything. I'm gonna DM Tiran right now. I'm DMing Tiran right now. This is like a god roll of cars we could find. Now keep this one in mind for later. Aside from its low mileage and perfect color, it's also unmissable in an event later on. Anyway, after failing to win at the FR challenge for now, we looked towards other events where we would find the Japanese Compact Car Cup, which gave us a nice 25,000 credits. But we were still a bit short of getting the best turbo upgrade for this car, which cost 40,000 credits. This is where we tried doing a race in the Clubman Cup, where we were matched up against some pretty decent opponents, including one which I'm very well familiar with, a red Ford RS 200. Now that 300C we had beaten was on a very short and twisty track, so we would have no chance at Deep Forest, right? Well, it's time to show the first signs of the Giga Chino. How far are we behind? Oh, 2.7, we have a chance, I'm really sending it right now, like I am focused. I am like laser focused right now. We're catching this RS200 no matter what. It's right there, come on. If we're like 2 seconds behind by the end of this lap, we have a chance. Okay, we need to have a perfect final turn. That was a perfect final turn. We're passing the RS2. Okay, we're catching up at least, we're not passing him yet. Come on, we're right on the still. Send it. I think he's gonna pass us again here. Yeah, we're gonna have no power here. I'll let him by, And now I'll pass him like this. We need to build a gap now. Come on. I think we have him. We win this. Get destroyed. Oh boy, that felt good. That felt very good. This is why I play GT4. This is the exact reason why I play this game. It's just so much fun, man. After doing a few more races, we had enough money to buy ourselves the best turbocharger available for the Cappuccino, which gave it a much more respectable 117 brake horsepower. So with more than 30% more horsepower than before, it should be more than enough to beat the FR challenge, right? Yeah, I think we're fine here. Aside from some minor shenanigans, we had completed the event without many issues. We then gave our little Cappuccino some much deserved love by giving it a racing wing and found the rims of the Ford RS200 that we had literally just beaten. So we did the sensible thing and scrapped its parts for our cause, as they admittedly fit the car really well. We also had enough money to give the car some nitrous, which basically allows us to double the amount of power for as long as we can use it, therefore temporarily giving us nearly 240 brake horsepower, which still does not sound like a lot, but when you take into account the fact that this car weighs just over 600 kilograms, it will basically have a power to weight ratio of most supercars while using nitrous. So with that in mind, it was time to go to the Turbo Sports race, as it would also give us quite a bit of money for every win. And with our new turbo and nitrous applied, it was our time to shine. Oh, we're actually smoking them with this nitrous. Wow. The mighty Cappuccino was really shaping up to be a bona fide race car, with the downforce in particular making the car practically unbeatable in the corners while it also has just enough power to keep up on the straights. Since we got nearly 40,000 credits from the Turbo Sports event, we were able to get a racing transmission and suspension, which made the car even faster and allowed us to reach nearly 240 km per hour on the straights. But after all of those good races, it was time for the car's biggest challenge yet, the Tuning Car Grand Prix. This is a 5-race championship which puts you up against some pretty fast cars from a variety of tuning brands. So we were going to need a fully maxed out car with racing tires, as the opponents were also using them, and we would have absolutely no chance if we didn't use those as well. Oh, and we also need the National A license. Give me a sec. Understeer! Ah, there we go. Before we could compete, we first needed some money again, and luckily the National A license allows us to compete in a few more Japanese championships, so that's exactly what we did. And considering we had beaten the Turbo Sports race, where the opponents all drive pretty much the same cars as we would find here, we were able to win all of the races and earn ourselves almost 70,000 credits. Let's go, 35,000. After spending it on an old Civic to use later,
cool vibrations,
we bought ourselves some soft racing tires and headed over to the tuning car Grand Prix, where we were matched up against a few tuned S2000s, an FC RX-7, Lancer Evo, and an R34 Skyline. I was now ready for the challenge that we had to face, but I was definitely not ready for the amount of grip thanks to our new set of soft racing tires. Oh, it's a go-kart. It's a go-kart. It's a go-kart. There's no way this car slows after any of these turns. It's so grippy. There was just one problem though. One of the S2000s in this race was from a tuning company known as Opera Performance. It may seem like your ordinary souped up sports car, but make no mistake, it's an absolute menace on the track. The low weight combined with a good amount of downforce makes this car incredibly fast in the corners and allows it to exit turns very quickly just like us. But it was at this exact event that the Cappuccino would ascend to become the Gigachino.
Try to use as little nitrous as possible, but at the same time keeping in mind, man. I missed a turn a little bit. Are we okay? Are we okay? No way. No way. No way. Let's go! For this course, it's just like a go-kart. Oh, look at the speed difference on the hill! Oh my goodness. That's so good. But there it is. GG.
Although some of the races were tough, our tiny car steamrolled the competition to win every single race in this championship, giving us 70,000 credits in total and completing one of the first truly difficult events in this playthrough. The car was so good that we decided to give the Gigachino its own emote on my Twitch channel, which is also where I've streamed this entire playthrough. This was also the moment where the Gigachino could finally get some well-deserved rest, because we did pretty much every event we could possibly do with this car for now. The success of the Gigachino had given us another advantage. The events that we had to complete gave us well over 100,000 credits, so we were able to easily do some of the other championships. Our first stop was the FF Championship, which we did in that Civic that we bought earlier, and went by without many issues. The next event on our list was the MR Cup, for which we had bought a Toyota SW20 MR2 and was easily capable of beating that one as well. It was then time for a slightly more difficult event again, the Naturally Aspirated Car Challenge. For this, we had found ourselves a 4th gen Chevrolet Corvette Grand Sport, which surprisingly only costs you just under 23,000 credits. This car turned out to be an amazing choice, as it was very nice to drive and had a really nice engine sound thanks to the mod that we were using. The final drivetrain specific event was the 4-wheel drive challenge, but this time we had found ourselves a rather peculiar Nissan Skyline in yellow for exactly 24,990 credits, therefore perfectly fitting our requirement for this challenge. Now, if you're familiar with the memes surrounding the Gran Turismo series, you've probably heard of a certain Lancer Evolution, and considering this would pretty much be the Nissan equivalent of that, we bought it on the spot and immediately used it to shred our opponent in the 4-wheel drive challenge. But a yellow car is nothing without some appropriate music from Daiki Casio, which is when this happened.
This is not okay. This is not okay. I can't stop laughing. Hold on. Hello, hold on. That's another 30 decibels. Oh, look. Wait. No, we're not doing that. We're not going that far. We're not going that far. No, 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 no. We're not going that far. No.
After doing all of these events, there was one more left in the beginner hall, the sports truck race. But this also gives us a problem. How are we going to complete this event when there are no used sports trucks available in the game? Well, that's where this mod comes in what I can only guess as a massive brainwave from the mod makers, the Daihatsu Midget 2 was added as one of the eligible cars for this event, therefore giving us a way to complete it with a used car. However, with only 35 brake horsepower by default, we would need to upgrade this thing just about as much as the Gigachino just to be able to compete. So we did just that, giving it as many upgrades as possible to bring it just over 100 horsepower and 500 kilos. A pretty respectable power to weight ratio, especially considering the fact that our opponents are driving pickup trucks which weigh at least 3 times as much as ours. We then entered the events with the Midget, where it didn't really win, because it absolutely smashed the event instead.
Oh, this is so cursed. I'm actually winning too. Oh, we're winning easily. There it is. There it is, guys. Midget has won. Cursed image.
In fact, this car was so fast that it didn't even have to use nitrous at Seattle, as the car's low weight made it significantly faster than the heavy trucks that we were up against. Unfortunately, making the Midget competitive for the sport truck race made me broke again, so we headed back out to do some more regional and one-make races to earn some money back. From the Civic Cup to Stars and Stripes, we used the cars that we had obtained so far to pretty much earn back all of our money. We then used this money to buy an old Subaru Legacy to compete in the Boxer Spirit event. We also managed to do the International B license at this point, as some events that have really good payouts like the Subaru one-make event are locked behind this license. We were now well on our way to complete all of the beginner and professional events to unlock that prestigious Gran Turismo World Championship. All we needed now was one more license, a classic car, a car of over 493 horsepower for the Supercar Festival, and a car that will be capable of beating the World Championship. And it just so happened that we already had 2 contenders for those last 2 events I just mentioned, which we turned into 3 by buying a Mazda RX-7 FD, which is yet another one to be added to our collection of yellow cars. But first, there was one more event that we could do with our mighty Gigachino, the Compact Car Cup. And unsurprisingly, considering the car was able to beat cars which are way more powerful, the championship was a complete cakewalk. But still gave us nearly 70,000 credits. However, we were still missing a classic car, so to refresh the lineup a few times, we already started with the International A license. I would then check the used car dealership after every couple of tests to see if there's anything we needed in there. And after a few attempts, we had found this.
It's the Fiat 500L in almost yellow, and we can use this in the Classic Car Cup. Oh, you know what we're gonna do after this, guys. Yep.
A Fiat 500L. A car with a very fitting name considering the fact that it only has 17 brake horsepower by default, but it is from before 1970, which means it is eligible to race in the Classic Car Championship. And so, after thinking about it for a whole 3 seconds, I bought the car, threw in as many upgrades as possible and gave it a try. The tiny Fiat turned out to be quite a pocket rocket, similar to the Gigachino that we had used before. Most of the classic cars that can appear in a championship are easily beatable by our funky Fiat, but there are 3 that stand out in terms of performance: the Shelby and AC Cobra and the Buick Special, which are way more powerful than the rest of the cars and can be very difficult to beat. So we did the sensible thing and tried to beat them at their own game. First, I wanted to find a lineup that contained both the Special and the Cobra, but unfortunately the Special was just too fast for us, so we gave up on that one and simply settled on just battling the Cobra. However, that car was also incredibly fast, so at some of the events we had to resort to some interesting tactics. But luckily, most of the races turned out to be pretty doable. But that definitely did not mean we were going to have an easy time, because the Fiat's rear engine layout and a lack of rear wing made it much harder to drive than the Gigachino, despite the fact that the car has less power and weight. This then led to some pretty cool fights between us and the Shelby Cobra, especially since we were able to do qualifying runs in this event, which really helped with actually winning the championship. Oh, and there was also the Citroën 2 Chevaux, which we managed to lap in a 2-lap race, which was, I think, kinda funny. This then only left us with the Supercar Festival before we can make it to the World Championship. And with both events requiring similar performance levels, it was already time to think about our ultimate track weapon. If you have seen my road car only playthrough, I had already made a list of features that every car needs to be able to compete at the Gran Turismo World Championship, where you will be matched up against a variety of Le Mans prototypes, GT1s and fantasy race cars. To summarize that video, we will need a car that doesn't tread its tires in a few laps, has decent cornering grip, must have at least 500 brake horsepower when not being too heavy, and last but not least, should have a wing available for it to get some of that all-important downforce. In order to not just gamble on one car and waste all my money on a single build, I loaded up a different save file where I had plenty of money to try out all of our potential contenders. We then headed to Tokyo Road 246 as our testing ground, as it's also one of the first races of the World Championship, and used a stock Pescarolo C60 normal prototype to set a benchmark lap. After driving it around for a bit, we got to a 1 minute 19.5 on racing medium tires. Although my target time was set to be below a 1 minute 25, as this track is notorious for requiring a high amount of downforce, something which our cars will inevitably not have enough of. I also bought a set of mediums and a set of softs for each car. The softs will be used to set a qualifying time, while the mediums would be a way of testing the car's race pace. The first car on our list was a Nissan 300ZX, which easily smashed the target performance figures by having over 800 horsepower when maxed out, while weighing just around 1250 kilograms. However, the car felt a bit clunky through the turns and the power wasn't enough to compensate for that, so we had only managed to set a qualifying time of a 1:26.5. The next car on our list was an R34 Skyline, which had pretty much the same amount of power and weight as the 300ZX, but had a little bit more downforce at the rear and was significantly faster out of the corners thanks to the car's all-wheel drive, giving us our first car that was able of doing a sub 1 minute 25 at Tokyo. We had also tried its older brother in the R32 Skyline, but was unfortunately 2 seconds slower as it had almost 100 horsepower less than the R34 with a very minor weight advantage. Next up was the Toyota Supra. This car will be able to achieve nearly 900 horsepower with once again the same weight as the Skyline and 300ZX, which made it ludicrously quick on the straights. This was also reflected in its lap time, as it was about as fast as the Skyline in terms of both race pace and qualifying pace, but was much more difficult to drive. Another car to try out was the TVR Griffith 500, which was a car that was very different in terms of raw performance. It only had 574 brake horsepower but weighed just over 900 kilograms, which would make it better in the turns but not enough to warrant its lack of power, as it had a similar lap time to the R32 Skyline, lapping just under a 1 minute 27. And since the Corvette Grand Sport had similar power figures while weighing a few hundred kilograms more, there wasn't much hope for that car either. A Subaru Impreza was up next, which had less power and more weight than the Griffith, so after driving for just 2 laps, it was already obvious that this car was not going to cut it as well. And then there was the Mazda RX-7 FD. At first, the performance figures were quite middling at best. Around 600 horsepower while weighing just under 1.1 tons was not bad, but definitely not as much as the 800 horsepower monsters that we had tried before. And then we took it to the track.
Non-optimal lap. 124.2.
To start off, this car has an unreal amount of cornering grip. The speed that this car was able to bring into the corners was so good that it was almost keeping off the Pescarolo in the corners, while the exit speed out of the slow corners was so incredibly good that it was even better than the Skylines that we had tested earlier. This allowed the car to do a low 1 minute 24, and that's including the fact that my lap in this car was far from optimal. So with this in mind, there wasn't much to consider anymore, as our car of choice was going to be the yellow RX-7 that we had bought earlier. But there was a problem. We were going to need money. Lots and lots of money. And if you even wanted to have a chance of winning the World Championship, we had to be very well prepared. This meant that we needed to buy every single item that we could use, like all of the tire compounds, rigidity reset and the stage 5 turbocharger. The problem, however, is that this would cost me at least 300,000 credits, so we got to work. First off, we gave it a good shakedown at the Mazda 1-make event, but we were still not even close to our goal. And then it hit me, what if we tried to use this car at the Japanese GT Championship? Sure, our car is 100 horsepower down compared to the opposition and didn't have as much downforce, but it was still worth a try. But this is exactly where we found out just how fast this car can be.
This start of this car is just unfair. Yeah, this is go pull, but we can pull them right back into our line of sight. Maybe pass him.
To put it simply, the RX-7 is so fast in the corners that it doesn't even need the power here. There aren't a lot of cars that can take 130R Suzuka at nearly 250 km per hour on racing medium tires, so it's truly something special. And with every single race in the Japanese GT Championship in the bag, we were awarded with 250,000 credits, which is plenty of money to buy the final upgrades that we needed, bumping the car's horsepower figures up to nearly 600 horsepower and allowing it to compete in the Supercar Festival. Now, considering its utterly dominant performance in the JGTC Championship, how would you think it performed against a bunch of stock supercars? Well, I'll let the gameplay do the talking for me.
No chance. Sian, no chance. Bye bye.
Unsurprisingly, the car annihilated everything in its path, which means there is only one more championship left for us to complete. Before we could enter the Gran Turismo World Championship, it was time for some testing to see what the RX-7 is capable of and if there are any problems we needed to fix. But this is where we found out that this car is capable of reaching over 400 km per hour at the test course, complete a quarter mile in just over 9 seconds, and complete a lap of Tsukuba in 47 seconds. To put that into perspective, the HKS TRB03, a time attack car purposely built to beat track records like the one on Tsukuba, has a lap time of just under 50 seconds. So to say that this car is absolutely insane is quite an understatement. We also found out that during the JGTC Championship, the car has a very balanced tire degradation and will easily be able to complete all of the World Championship races with only a single pit stop at most. And so, with the car fine-tuned and ready, we headed back to Tokyo for the start of the Gran Turismo World Championship. Our opponents would consist of a McLaren F1, which funnily enough counts as a BMW in this game, a Chevrolet Camaro LM race car, a Chaparral 2J, and a Mercedes-Benz wait a second, is that Eden from his non-Japanese car challenge? You know what, let's call him and see what's up.
Hello?
Hey Eden, are you back in the CLK again already?
Hi! It can't actually be me in the car, it actually got stolen.
What? Stolen? How did you manage to lose the Le Mans race car?
Well, take a guess who took it.
Oh jeez, please don't tell me it's that guy again.
How about I make this a real challenge?
Yeah. But honestly, considering what happened last time, I think you'll be fine.
Well, I guess I'll get to it then. Take care, Eden. And thank Walter for me. Well, the real one, of course.
Yeah, will do. Take care out there, okay? Alright. Really doesn't know when to quit.
After that rather disturbing revelation, we started with our qualifying session. Now, considering the AI always uses racing mediums while we can use any tire we want, we have a massive advantage when it comes to qualifying. The funny thing, however, is that we don't even need to make use of a softer tire set for our first qualifying session, as the car is already fast enough to reach pole position. And now, after all of the testing and qualifying, it was finally time to race. The lights go out and we immediately get jumped by the Mercedes, who has a great start, throwing us into an early battle for the lead with it. We then quickly manage to take that lead back, but we are unable to create a gap between us and the Mercedes. This then continued for a few more laps until the Mercedes started to have more pace than us, which then forced me into a mistake, outbraking myself at the first turn. The CLK then ran off into the distance, and after a few laps we even got the Gilet passing us as our tires were starting to wear out. We then had a tough decision to make. Do we stay out for as long as possible and give the car a softer tire compound for the second stint, or do we pit in early and give ourselves a steady second stint on another set of mediums? In this case, the latter was chosen. We went into the pits and came out just behind the Camaro, who was in last, but the fresh head of rubber immediately worked wonders as the Camaro was very quickly taken care of. We then quickly caught up with the Chaparral 2J and cleanly passed it for 4th. And to make things even better, the Gilet Vertigo had made a pit stop the moment we passed the 2J. After flying through the final sector and onto the start-finish straight, the Vertigo got onto the track right beside us, but since he was on cold tires, the only thing that could save him was the incredible straight line speed, which was luckily not enough to outpace us. To To make things even better, the CLK GTR decided to pit at the very last lap. But despite our best efforts to catch back up, he was simply too fast and was still a comfortable 20 seconds ahead. However, the McLaren F1 didn't pit at all, and since it was much closer than the CLK than we were, it actually managed to steal the victory away from the Mercedes. And although 3rd place seems like a disappointing result given how the first few laps of the race went, at least we didn't display some major skill issues, unlike last time. The second race of the championship was going to be at the Twingwing Motegi Super Speedway, and all I could think of was one thing, and one thing only: survive. I knew that we would be completely outclassed on this track, as we are down on both power and downforce compared to our opposition, so all we could do here is try to not finish dead last. After doing a little more testing to make sure we had a good tire strategy and using some super softs to claim pole position again, we were able to buy ourselves some time in the early stages. But the Mercedes, McLaren and Gillet would pass us before the 3rd lap had even begun. The situation then went from bad to worse as the Chaparral 2J had also caught up and passed us. And despite our best efforts to keep up and perform some slipstreaming, he too eventually vanished on the horizon. A small silver lining on this race, however, was that the CLK had actually won it, which meant that both the McLaren and the Mercedes are now tied on points, making our deficit to either of them slightly better than it could have been. But either way, we were still 10 points behind at this point, so we had some catching up to do. And oh boy, did we just get the right track to start that comeback. Now, it probably goes without much saying that our RX-7 should be better on tight and slower tracks than it would be on high speed ones. So when you consider the fact that the 3rd race of the championship takes place in Hong Kong, it was the perfect opportunity to turn this championship around. Now, remember when the R390 road car had a lead of over 5 seconds at Hong Kong when we did the road car only run? Now, what if I told you that the RX-7 literally managed to replicate just that? So yeah, when I mentioned that slower tracks would be better for us, it certainly wasn't an understatement. What's even better is that Hong Kong has a rolling start, which makes it much easier for us to defend 1st place at the start of the race than a standing start would. This allowed us to easily fend off the Mercedes and immediately build a lead of over 5 seconds in a single lap. This lead then increased to 7 seconds, and then 10 seconds, and nearly 12 seconds. This was a race where I really got into the zone and had an incredible race pace. After pitting at lap 9, the CLK will be ahead of us for only a single lap as it pitted in the very next one. This then allowed us to extend our lead to around 30 seconds, which gave me a rather funny idea. What if we made a pit stop for super soft tires to try to set a ludicrously fast lap? After doing a bit of calculation on how much time we would lose, we made the pit stop, threw on the insane tire compound, and had immediately beaten our previous lap record by half a second. Which is quite insane considering the fact that we literally did this on an outlap. After setting a rather ridiculous lap time of 1 minute and 10 seconds, for the record this was the fastest lap time with the R390 GT1 road car that we had used last time, we would claim our first victory in the championship with a lead of around 20 seconds, reducing the gap to the championship leader down to only 6 points. The next race on the calendar was Seoul Central, a much faster and quicker street track than Hong Kong. But despite the track's fast-paced layout, we still managed to easily qualify in 1st place, then lead into the first few turns, after which we never had to look back anymore. We even had the luxury to pit at lap 13 out of 19, giving us the ability to install some soft tires for a quick final stint. It did put us back into 3rd place though, so we really had to hope that the CLK GTR was going to make a pit stop. And after reclaiming 2nd place by passing the Gillet, which admittedly had a really good championship run so far, we were waiting for the Mercedes to enter the pits. But then it became lap 16, lap 17 and he still did not pit in yet. But eventually, 2 laps before the end, his tires finally gave in and forced him to make a pit stop, giving us a comfortable 15-second lead as we took our 2nd victory in a row, putting us in 2nd place in the championship and reducing the gap to the lead to only 2 points. Another win at the next race could put us into the lead of the championship, but I was very cautiously optimistic as the track we were going to race on next was El Capitan, which is notorious for its tricky corners and steep elevation changes, capable of easily shredding your tires if you're not careful enough. But we were faced with an entirely different problem. After all of those races, the performance boost from the oil had worn off. After driving for more than 200 kilometers since an oil replacement, the performance boost you get from it will start to wear off, losing its effect entirely after another 100 kilometers. This is when someone in the chat told me that you can actually change the oil while you're in the middle of a championship. And to my surprise, it actually worked.
What? I have never seen this before. I know. What? How? You're a legend. You're a legend for telling me this. I never knew this was possible. What? You can go to the oil man in the middle of a championship? Hello? 3 billion IQ, okay.
You were even able to wash the car, which is something that the car very much needed and deserved after those 2 wins. So with our car ready to race once again, we headed back to El Capitan to continue the championship. Qualifying went about as well as you may expect, especially since the car's amazing balance allowed it to easily clear the crests and bumps that this track can throw at you. What's even better is the fact that the McLaren F1 qualified ahead of the Mercedes, so our main championship rival would have a much harder time in trying to take an early lead. And so we line up on the starting grid for the 5th race in the World Championship, high on confidence while also being a little bit nervous.
Even think he's not gonna start now because he's slow on the start.
Our car's launch was more than fast enough to keep the McLaren behind us and build a 2-second lead in the first sector alone, which then quickly increased to nearly 8 seconds after the first lap. This trend would then continue throughout the first half of the race, until the CLK GTR had finally passed the F1 for 2nd place, but was still a whopping 22 seconds behind us, which was more than enough to exit the pit lane with only a 4-second gap between us and the leader, and even managing to perfectly keep the McLaren behind us. Our fresh set of rubber then allowed us to make light work of the gap, and eventually of the Mercedes itself as it struggled for grip while we speared off into the distance. But since we had done only 5 laps on mediums and had pitted for another set of them, how are we going to extend our stint by another lap, especially considering how it was so difficult last time we drove here? The answer? We weren't. Our lead had increased to a massive 36 seconds, which was more than enough to replicate what we did at Hong Kong and pit in the penultimate lap for a set of super softs to completely destroy our personal best time, while still finishing a comfortable 20 seconds ahead of the Mercedes. And with our 3rd win in a row, we were now in the lead of the championship. Continuing with the American leg of this championship, we headed to the Big Apple for the championship's 6th race. And since it's another street track, you can probably guess how this one went. We got pole position by just a tiny margin, and after keeping the Mercedes behind us on the main straights, we were actually in for a much closer fight than before, as the raw power of our main rival would allow it to catch back up on the straights. However, our car's incredible traction in low speed corners was sufficient to manage a gap of at least a few seconds, which was completely kept intact after we both made our pit stops. It also seemed like the Camaro race car and the Gillet Vertigo had major skill issues at this track, as we were easily able to lap both of them. Another win in the bag, with now a 6-point lead over the Mercedes, which is now our only real rival as the McLaren at this point had fallen off in the standings. It was then time for the final street race in the championship, Opera Paris. Another notorious track thanks to its extremely tight sections and complexes as well as its bumpiness, made even worse by the fact that you are driving on the reverse layout, which makes some of the track's corner sequences even more difficult. But once again, just like in Hong Kong and New York, our car was perfectly made for these kinds of tracks. Another easy qualifying session to ground us pole position, and a rolling start immediately leading into turn 1 made it trivial for us to keep 1st place, easily building a gap of almost 6 seconds after only a single lap, which was then increased to over 20 seconds when it was time to make our pit stop, which was more than enough to stay in 2nd place with only a few seconds between us and the CLK. And since it pitted right as we were about to pass him for the lead, we once again got the opportunity to make a free pit stop towards the end of the race, which is exactly what we did. We then managed to set a lap time that was so quick that it was 6 seconds faster than our fastest lap time in the R390 road car, which just shows how much faster this car is on tracks with many low speed corners. And with that, we had now won 5 races in a row, bringing our total lead up to a much more comfortable 10 points. This definitely did not mean that the championship was ours already though. The next race was going to be at Suzuka, a track that features a lot more high-speed sections, which was going to be much more difficult for us. Now, despite the difficulties that we could face at this track, it is also one that I have quite some experience at and is also one I genuinely like to drive on. That experience already paid off as we could easily secure pole position, but it definitely did not prepare me for the race that we will be having here. One major red flag will be visible as soon as we backed out of the qualifying session and looked at the starting grid.
Am I seeing this correctly? Hold on a second. Why is the CLK in 5th? And why is the Gila in 2nd? What happened here? Hello? Is the game on crack? Is the game actually on crack? The Kazunori like put some Zaza into the game here? Why is the... Somebody said the Gila was a bad car, I think. Somebody said he's expected it to be better. The Gila is in 2nd. BMW is in 3rd. The McLaren. If MG is in 5th, this is gonna be an easy win.
Yes, what you're seeing here is right. The Mercedes was in 5th place. Behind the Chaparral, McLaren, and yes, the Gila Vertigo would be on the first row of the grid. Now, initially, I expected that this would basically allow us to secure the championship at Suzuka already, as 18 points would be just enough to win it all. But I was also a bit nervous, as a bad run on this track could make our life very difficult when coming into the final 2 races. So with the tension building up, we line up on the starting grid for the 8th race in the championship. As soon as the lights went out, the Vertigo speared off into the distance with the Chaparral and McLaren quickly chasing after me as well. I luckily managed to out-accelerate the Vertigo out of turn 2 to retake the lead, but then the nervousness got to me as I made a mistake a few corners later.
It's alright. Oh my god, I'm pushed off. I'm getting pushed off.
Although I did manage to keep 2nd place, we soon found out that the Vertigo, after all of its embarrassment, finally had enough.
Oh, we're at this rate of acceleration. Whoa. I'm getting pushed off by the freaking Vertigo, man. What is he doing?
First off, we almost got annihilated after making a daring outside pass with 2 wheels dipped in the grass. But we luckily managed to hold on and make an inside pass on the hairpin to keep the lead. We then came onto the back straight towards 130R where it really looked like the Vertigo had saved up all of its power just for this race. Now, we did have the advantage when we went through said 130R, but after preparing for an outside pass, this happened.
On the inside. That was totally on the Vertigo. That's totally on the Vertigo.
This exact moment was when the Vertigo basically signed a declaration of war with us, as we were sent back into 4th place and a couple of seconds behind the Vertigo. We recovered back onto the main straight and immediately made a double pass on the F1 and CLK GTR to reclaim 2nd place, allowing us to quickly catch back up to the Vertigo.
I don't care, I'm not giving up. We're taking that Vertigo down.
It then seemed to have made a small mistake as it went too wide and onto the gravel at the 2nd Deckner curve, giving us a perfect opportunity for an overtake, which we rather naively placed on the outside once again. But this time it worked, with the grass even giving us a bit of extra rotation coming into the corner to then easily accelerate away from the Vertigo. But we were definitely not out of the woods yet. It immediately took back the lead from us as we approached the spoon curves. Then brake much earlier than anticipated, which for once allowed me to make a pass on the inside instead of on the outside. This was something that the Vertigo clearly didn't account for, as the driver was probably expecting me to be scared after what happened in the last lap, so it steered towards the apex of the corner anyway. It then proceeded to fly off into the gravel and perform probably one of the worst rejoin attempts I have ever seen from a Gran Turismo 4 AI, pushing it all the way back from 1st place to 2nd to last place. With that strange occurrence out of the way, it was time to shift our focus on what's actually important, winning the race. All of the shenanigans with the Vertigo had not been very helpful, as the Mercedes now took 2nd place while our tire wear had taken a nosedive from all that incident-riddled battling that we have done. And so after only 4 laps of racing, we decided to make a huge undercut in hoping to have a much cleaner 2nd stint, opting for another set of mediums as these were the ones we used to start the race with. The Chaparral 2J then gave us a helping hand by allowing us to pull into its slipstream on the back straight, but we still had to make sure that we would get ahead of the CLK GTR once he entered the pit lane, so we tried to keep our pace up as much as possible. This was then helped by the fact that it forgot how to get through the spoon corners and had a minor off-track moment, reducing the lead down to only 20 seconds. At this point you're also probably wondering where the Vertigo went.
Oh, the rack was spinning again. Goodbye, sucker! That's what you deserve!
The Vertigo seemed to like the gravel trap at the spoon corner so much that it decided to play around in it for a little longer, once again taking its sweet time to get back on track, which is something I can only describe as pure, distilled karma. The Mercedes and McLaren then both decided to pit right before the penultimate lap, and with the tires looking much better than in our first stint, all we had to do was to just bring it home.
A rough start to the race. And we got the victory. Let's go. That feels good, man. That feels good.
We then headed into the penultimate round of the championship at Grand Valley Speedway with a 14-point lead, and after giving the car one last oil change and a good wash after some very dirty fights, we headed out for the final stint of the championship. Qualifying once again went just as expected, but this time we decided to also do a few more laps to minimize our risk of having problems with tire degradation. Unlike Suzuka, the grid actually looked a lot more normal this time, with the only difference being the fact that the Camaro LM race car actually managed to not qualify in last for once, so the Chaparral driver should be pretty embarrassed with that qualifying result. We then managed to have a pretty decent start of the line, but our main rival who was right next to us didn't. This allowed the McLaren to take second place and the Camaro was even able to sneak into third, which would probably make for a nice desk slam from Toto Wolff if this was Formula 1. However, after only a single lap, everything will be back to normal as the COK took back second place, but we had already built up a 10-second lead at this point. This comfortable lead then allowed me to reduce the pace to save our tires, pitting at the end of the 5th lap for another set of mediums. Now, you may be thinking that this would be a bad idea as we would have to do an extra lap on the same set of tires, but if we were able to properly manage them, we may just be able to pull it off. The Mercedes and McLaren would once again both pit on the same lap, which granted us the lead with only 3 laps remaining. However, the Mercedes was not done with us yet, as he kept our lead to a minimum, so we were constantly trying to keep a good pace while still making sure that our tires would make it to the end. Although the lead then once again increased to almost 10 seconds before the penultimate lap, our tires were really starting to wear out at this point, but just like at Suzuka, all we had to do was to just bring it home.
We did it. Let's go! Let's go. The mighty RX-7 has done it.
With what was now our 7th victory in a row, we had secured an 18-point lead over the Mercedes COK GTR. And with 1 race remaining, there was no way that we could possibly lose the lead, which would make us the Gran Turismo World Champion. Now, just like last time, we still had that race at Le Mans left, so it was time for yet another victory lap around it while still showing just how fast our mighty RX-7 could go in a straight line. After some quick testing and finishing our qualifying session, or at this point I may as well call it pole position session as we literally managed to get pole position in every single race of the championship, we will begin our final race with the Vertigo funnily enough still not wanting to give up as it started from 3rd position. Although the COK GTR showed off its home ground advantage by immediately passing us on the straight, we simply relaxed as all we wanted to do was to take its slipstream down the Mulsanne straight just to see how fast we could go. And with a little help of some nitrous, we had managed to reach a very respectable 360 km per hour, after which I immediately forgot to brake on time and missed the first chicane. Luckily, we didn't really have to care much about this race as all we had to do was to bring it home safely. We then also let the Vertigo by as it was significantly faster than us and was probably trying to claim a sensational victory. But we all know that saying Vertigo and victory in the same sentence is practically impossible. And so, after having a rather interesting moment at the Porsche curves, we simply cruised towards the finish line to take 3rd place, becoming the Gran Turismo World Champion.
And there it is. It's over. A 3rd place finish, but it's all we need. We are a 14 points difference, 12 point difference I think. A 12 point difference indeed. 80 points in the championship. The winner of the Gran Turismo World Championship. Now, it's safe to say that this was by far the most fun playthrough I have ever done in Gran Turismo 4, easily beating out both the road car only and randomizer price car only playthroughs that we have done before. But after claiming the World Championship trophy along with the prize money and the Spoon ST1000 race car, since we were still on the randomizer mod, I didn't feel like we were done just yet.
These races were challenging and yet so much fun that I wanted to see how much further we could push our cars. So I'll see you all at the Extreme Hall. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. If you did, you know what to do. Like the video, leave a comment and subscribe if you want to see more like this in the future, including the next part of this video of course. And if you want to give even more support, you can now become a channel member. It will give some additional support for these videos, allowing me to do stuff like the live action footage that you've seen in this video. You can find more information about this by clicking the join button below. All of the gameplay you saw was also streamed live on my Twitch channel, for which you can find the link in the description, as well as the link to my Discord server if you want to discuss things like this playthrough, or even want to suggest new ones. Anyway, that will be it for this episode, so all that's left for me to say is that I would like to thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.